get down to this river and suddenly I'm gifted with the presence of the divine. A merging and melting of light, of energy, of presence. I realized I am not separate from this divinity. Suddenly, the God-sized hole had been filled with God.
There are certain kinds of spiritual awakenings that can do instantaneously what many of us spend our entire lives trying to conquer and heal from. Sadhvi Bhagawati Saraswati is a global spiritual leader. She is an American-born graduate of Stanford University. She's got a PhD in psychology. She left behind her life and had an experience in the Ganga River that changed the course of her marriage, her career, her trauma, and her entire story. You're trained as a scientist. That fundamentally defies all of the laws of science that we've been taught to believe in.
I thought, there is no way that I actually have just become free. All of the neurosis, bulimia, depression, the anxiety around this abuse, I spent the first several months trying to re-trigger myself. People are looking for spirituality. There is violence, there's war, there's oppression, there's division and fear and destruction of our environment. Standing between us and a spiritual awakening is not what we don't have, but what we're holding on to.
Hi, I'm Mayim Bialik.
And I'm Jonathan Cohen.
And welcome to our breakdown. Today we're going to be talking about a miraculous spiritual awakening. And when I say miraculous, I'm talking about the fact that there are things that we think we understand about how the body works, how the mind works, how we heal, how we recover, how we process trauma. Guess what? There are certain kinds of spiritual awakenings that can do instantaneously what many of us spend our entire lives trying to conquer and heal from.
Our guest today had a profound and miraculous spiritual awakening in a moment where she felt divine presence that forever changed her life.
Sadhvi Bhagawati Saraswati is a global spiritual leader and a best-selling author. She's lived in the Himalayas for 30 years, but her story began in Hollywood. She is an American-born graduate of Stanford University. She's got a PhD in psychology. She left behind her life because her husband was on a spiritual journey. She reluctantly followed him to India, a non-believer, not a religious person, not a spiritual person, and had an experience in the Ganga River that changed her life and the course of her marriage, her career, her trauma, and her entire story. Her book, Hollywood to the Himalayas, is a memoir of sorts, but her latest book is Come Home to Yourself, simple answers to life's essential questions, which have been sourced from the community that she lives in India.
If you've ever contemplated, what is a spiritual awakening? How can I have a spiritual awakening? Can we connect directly with the divine? Can I hear intuition? What is the higher self? How do I know what my path is in this life? This episode may help you discover it.
And I should say, Sadhviji is a monk. She has taken vows and is part of an entire community. She actually lives in the world's yoga center. I didn't even know that that was a thing. She's the international director of Parmarth Nikatan, the Secretary General of the Global Interfaith WASH Alliance. She speaks all over the world at the United Nations. The Dalai Lama was at her book release party. She's an incredible speaker, thinker, leader, and we're so honored to have her here in person. Sadhvi Bhagawati Saraswati, welcome to The Breakdown. Break it down.
Thank you so much. It's so beautiful to be with you.
I read a lot of books for our podcast. You can see them adorned all around the room. Your book took me the longest to read of any book that I've read for this podcast. Not because it's long, which it is, but I'm a very fast reader. But there's something about your writing and your experience that took me a lot of time to process. And I've never done a podcast where I wasn't sure if I was going to get to the end of the book. And I was just really soaking it in. I really was taking time, and it's not a hard read. It's just a deep read. And your story has so many twists and turns that touch on kind of the hottest trouble points and the hottest flashpoints of people's lives: trauma, sexual abuse, eating disorders, devotion, love, commitment, sex, right? Everything. It's the best soap opera ever, but it's not a soap opera. So I've gone through both of your books, but Hollywood to the Himalayas, A Journey of Healing and Transformation is more of kind of a memoir.
Of course.
So I want to start there. And obviously, Come Home to Yourself is an extension of sorts. But, every few pages I was saying to Jonathan, you're not going to believe what happened next. You're not going to believe what happened next. So I want to give you the opportunity to tell us what happened in the best way that you can describe it. You had a very, very specific and profound instantaneous spiritual awakening, which continued to evolve. What happened?
Grace happened. Really. At that moment, and now 30 years later, and at every moment between then and now, I've been completely sure that actually that which happened was there was an opening in me that I was not even aware of, but that the vow I took on the airplane to India, that I was going to keep my heart open, somehow created in me, in the universe, in the connection between me and the universe, a place into which grace flowed. I believe deeply, and one of, for me, the deepest and corest messages of my book is grace does not discriminate. So I don't believe it brought grace or created grace or anything like that. All it did was open me to be able to have that experience. Because, as you know from reading it, I was not a religious person. I was not even someone who identified as spiritual. I was a scientist. I was an academic. I wasn't consciously looking for a spiritual experience. But on that airplane to India, on what I thought was just a 3-month break in my PhD program, I took that vow that I would keep my heart open. And in that vow, it made me, I think, willing to see, feel, accept, acknowledge, sit with really the truth of our existence. That experience that I had of being in the presence of the divine is an experience of truth. If you look throughout history at the stories and descriptions of mystics, of yogis, of different religious people, different spiritual people from all of the different religions, that's the central piece, is a pervasiveness of, an accessibility of the presence of divinity. And whether it's bowing to a tree, whether it's in a place of worship, whether it's any one of, hundreds of different experiences, it's always that experience of this pervasive presence. And by some incredible grace, I tapped into it. But it is really important to me that the experience was an experience of truth, that it's not like, oh, this was just my experience and it was unique to just me and my journey. But I was granted a window into a truth that has been accessed by countless people of countless traditions and paths for as long as we've got recorded history. But for me, it happened on the banks of the Ganges River in Rishikesh, India. The very first place that we went
And you were with your husband
I was
at the
with my
time.
husband at the time. I was 25. It was 1996, September of 1996. And there was no Google. And we had a 500-page Lonely Planet guidebook. And I vividly remember sitting in Delhi, so pleased with myself that I had found a place that actually served proper coffee rather than just Nescafe mixed into hot milk with sugar. And looked over this guidebook and said, Rishikesh. I mean, it just was like that. I didn't know anything about India anyway, which was partly why I took that vow on the plane, because the entire trip seemed so nonsensical to me. I wasn't drawn to India. I didn't know anything about it. I loved to travel, needed a break from my PhD program.
And your husband was seeking, and that's
He
where
was
he thought you
seeking.
should go.
He wanted to go to India. He was committed to going to India. I think he definitely would have gone even without me. And so all of those factors came together to, okay, sure. Along with the fact that I was a very strict vegetarian and had struggled throughout every other place I had traveled with getting pure vegetarian food. And I have lots of funny stories of me thinking that I had properly communicated in French or in Spanish or what, and that which arrived on my plate was so
Had a mother and a
different.
face.
Exactly. And what I had learned was if I could find an Indian restaurant, I could get vegetarian food. So all of that's what brought me there. And hence the vow on the plane, I'll keep my heart open. So here I am sitting over a cup of coffee in Delhi, open up a guidebook, and it says Rishikesh. I said, let's go. He said, great. I mean, it was relatively close to Delhi, yoga capital of the world, mountains, a river. I've always been a nature person, so that just sounded perfect. And we get there, and I go to stand on the banks of the Ganges River.
Like you do.
Like one does. But I didn't even know the river was holy. I mean, all of this is so mortifying to admit 30 years later, because it seems these days like everyone who comes knows so much more than I did.
They have the internet. That's cheating.
And they're seeking so much more than I consciously was. And I look at them and I think, why wasn't I seeking? But whatever God's divine plan was, I wasn't seeking on any conscious level. But I get down to this river that I don't even know is holy. And suddenly I'm gifted with this experience of being in the presence of the divine.
Mayim Bialik's breakdown is supported by Optimizer.
As I have been reflecting on the past year, I realized that one of the best discoveries of last year was magnesium breakthrough and how it's had a really, really positive impact on sleep. Jonathan and I discovered it a while ago, and it's kind of become a non-negotiable in our nighttime ritual. Better sleep sounds simple, but the difference is real. You can fall asleep faster, stay asleep longer, and wake up feeling rested. Those are the biggies. Not groggy, not drowsy, genuinely rested. And here's why it works. Most supplements use cheap single form magnesium that your body just can't use. But this one has 7 essential forms of magnesium with the Passport delivery system designed to help support magnesium absorption. The ripple effects are huge. I mean, less stress during the day, better muscle recovery from workouts, even digestion has improved. And the real win is deep restorative sleep. That's the foundation that everything else builds on. Go to buyoptimizers.com/breaker. Use our exclusive code BREAKER for 15% off.
If deep sleep has been on your upgrade list, this is it. Trust us. Mayim Bialik's breakdown is supported by Branch Basics.
2026 is all about building healthier routines, more greens, more steps, less stress. But the shift to non-toxic living can feel like a lot, but it doesn't have to. You can start small, swap synthetic air fresheners for essential oils, reuse glass jars instead of buying more plastic. But there's one swap that most people forget, and it might be the most important one of all: your cleaning products. In the US, cleaning companies aren't even required to list every ingredient on the label. You could be spraying and wiping your home with chemicals around kids, pets, food. That's why we love Branch Basics. It was founded by 3 women who, after years of research and trial and error, discovered that when they removed harmful chemicals from their homes, their health improved. Branch Basics is human-safe, plant and mineral-based, and made-safe certified, meaning it's been vetted for harmful toxins. It's built around one single concentrate formula that has endless uses, and it works. You just dilute it into reusable bottles, and that cleans your bathroom, your kitchen, your floors, your windows, and even your laundry. I've even been able to use it to wash produce, clean makeup brushes, which really blows my mind. We love their laundry detergent and their dishwasher tablets. They have earned permanent spots in my cleaning cupboard. And that gives us peace of mind that we're creating a safe and clean environment for the whole family. And here's the good news. Branch Basics is now available everywhere you shop. At Target, Target.com, Amazon, and of course, BranchBasics.com. Tossing the toxins has never been more convenient. And for anyone grabbing the premium starter kit, you can get 15% off at BranchBasics.com with our code BREAK. Just use the code BREAK for 15% off the premium starter kit at BranchBasics.com. And after you purchase, when they ask where you heard about them, please make sure to mention our show. If you don't have a concept at the time of what divinity is,
Yes.
explain to us what it felt like.
Okay. This has not gotten easier in 30 years. It began actually quite visually. As I looked out over the Ganges River, the Ganga River, the river was in the background. If you can think about your visual field splitting into background and foreground, they had been merged. A moment earlier, background, foreground was merged. All I saw was river.
A two-dimensional experience, essentially.
Suddenly, background, foreground split. So background stayed river. Foreground became this visual experience, but something that touched me on levels so far beyond my eyes and optic nerve and visual centers of the brain, of a presence of divinity, a merging and melting of light, of energy, of presence, of existence. It was almost like the molecules of existence. In the background, I could still see them as separate things, but in the foreground, it was one of those like, you think we are separate things. We are not separate things. We are all one thing, and it is all divinity. And it merged together. And I turned my head, and the background would change. Now I'm looking at marble steps. Now I'm looking at a telephone pole. Now I'm looking at a family, kids, a tree. Background would change. But that foreground stayed the same, of this melting, merging existence of oneness in energy, in light, in presence, that was almost like one of those optical illusion things of, do you only see the form, or can you see the merging of existence? I then at some point turned that vision inward. I do not know what inspired me to do that, but I am so glad I did, because I turned that vision inward. And for the first time in 25 years, I realized, oh my God, I am not separate from this divinity. I'm not bad, wrong, tainted, dirty, dark, stupid, worthless, all of the things that, regardless of how much we succeed externally, so many of us carry inside, and I certainly did. I'm none of those things. I'm one with this divine presence, inseparable from it. And it knocked me to the ground in tears of truth, of coming home. Yeah, and I knew that's where I was meant to be. I didn't know specifically where, doing what, why, but it didn't matter. For many, 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 many days, the entire rational, intellectual part of my brain had gone silent. I was rendered pretty much nonverbal. For several days, all I could say was, oh my God, it's so beautiful. Oh my God, it's so beautiful. Oh my God, it's so
You
beautiful.
were that girl on shrooms.
Yes, exactly. And yet, it had no half-life. There was a moment when my husband said, you need to come with me to Missouri, which is a hill station about 2.5 hours up into the hills from Rishikesh. I didn't want to go. This was fast forwarding a good maybe 7-10 days later. I had found Paramartha-Nikethan. I had found where I was living. But he said, I'm going, and if you don't come, our marriage is over. And there was a part of me that actually thought, well, okay, let's see if this thing has a half-life.
Because maybe you were having an experience that for whatever reason resonated around that location.
Or as the A+ student in Phil Zimbardo's Psychology of Mind Control class that I had been, maybe they were drugging my food. Maybe I had been brainwashed. Maybe one of 100 other things that my heart knew had not happened, but the over-indoctrinated part of my academic mind thought, well, this is the stuff we study about. This is how you brainwash. Maybe, who knows? So as much as I didn't want to go with him, there was a part of me that thought, well, let's see if this thing has a half-life. And what I discovered was no half-life. Yeah. And an experience that did not, in those early days, wax and wane or come and go in a way that when it's more chemically based, it does. It was external. It was internal. There was no distinction between external and internal. It all was just the most exquisite, perfect presence and self. Yeah, it's no less miraculous when I re-remember it decades later.
What did your husband think was happening to you?
Not to mention her parents.
Yes.
Especially in like 3 days, you just get there. You have this unbelievable experience. You're walking around saying, oh my God, how beautiful it is. What does your husband think is happening to his wife who used to speak on an airplane and now no longer speaks?
Yes. So first, he thought it was really beautiful. Yes, he had brought me to India. I think it really was one of those just senses of, you've been touched. This is so beautiful.
Cut to day 3 and he's like, bitch, chill out.
I don't think he realized the permanence or the fullness. I think he had been with me for the last few years as I had been struggling, as I had been, really working with the bulimia, working with a lot of the issues around abuse. I had been in and out of hospitals long before I met him. So was already well on my way to healing, but there was also still a lot left to do. So he had really been there through a lot of that work. And I think for him to see me with tears of spiritual ecstasy streaming down my face, he was really happy. I have vivid recollections until we were supposed to go up into the mountains. And I decided after having that experience that I did not want to go. I had a few days later met the incredible being who would become my guru, who was the head or is the head of Paramartha-Nikethan, the ashram that I live in, one of India's most revered spiritual masters, one of the world's most revered spiritual masters. I didn't know any of that at the time. I just knew that he was the head of this incredible place I wanted to stay in. I had met him. He had said I could stay. So I really wanted to stay back in Rishikesh. My husband wanted to continue with our plan to go up to the mountains. I had suffered very severe abandonment issues throughout my life due to having been abandoned as a child. My husband knew that there was no way in a million years that I was going to stay back if he went. And so he said, well, I'm going, knowing that I would say, okay, I'm coming. But I didn't. And I think that was the first indication that something much more permanent had happened, something much more impactful on not just my life, but our collective lives had happened. I said, okay, if you want to go, go.
Well, and I want to clarify here. What you felt happened was that there was some transformation, an instantaneous transformation that took the abandonment issues you had, that took that codependent clinging and neediness, and like poof, it was gone.
Absolutely.
And so when he said, I'm leaving, there was not the God-shaped hole that you felt the need to fill with him, whoever the him is,
Yes.
or whatever the him is. And you literally felt, I can be okay if he's not here.
Thank you.
Which
Perfect.
is also known as
Exactly.
like normal, right?
Exactly.
For people who don't have those kinds of issues.
Exactly. When I had that experience, it transformed how I understood myself, which prior to that moment had been someone seriously lacking. I think this is true for probably most survivors of abuse, but I also think it's much more pervasive than that. I think that being a human in this culture, most of us move through most of our lives, especially our young lives, feeling like I am not beautiful enough, successful enough, smart enough, popular enough, rich enough, athletic enough, good enough on the levels that matter to me, and that I'm full of holes, or as you said, that beautiful God-size hole, and that I need something or someone to fill it. And that certainly was my experience. The abandonment issues that I was suffering from manifested in such a way that I needed to be sure that I was never abandoned. And if that meant following my husband off into the mountains or to India, well, I would do that because as a child, that abandonment had been so traumatic that, as you know, as we move through our lives, working through those issues, we try
to repeat them.
Exactly. And try to heal them in whatever the very best way that we can.
We use the best tools and resources we have, right?
Exactly. And so up until that moment, abandonment had been terrifying to me.
And I also want to clarify for those of you who might be like, he wasn't abandoning her, he was going up the mountain. Mazel tov if that's your experience in life. For some of us, like someone leaving can literally, to use the word trigger. It can make you feel as if you're in a different timeline where you are being left. And it's not just fear of missing out. It's who am I when that person's not here?
And trigger is exactly the word, although it's become a little bit overused these days. But that's exactly the word. He was going off to the mountains.
Right.
But I had issues with people going off to work or off to school because until you've healed those core childhood wounds, life keeps triggering us. And so for me, abandonment was one of those triggers. Him going off to the mountains and leaving me in a place where I didn't know anyone, I didn't speak the language.
I mean, I'm anxious about Jim going to the mountains and I wasn't even married to him.
No means of communication. There's no way that my psyche would have been able to handle that.
But you felt calm.
That's what I was going to say.
That's exactly.
You just felt like
in that moment, after this incredible experience on the banks of the Ganga River, that experience of awakening, of transformation, suddenly there were no more holes. The God-sized hole had been filled with God. God was now in that. There were no holes. And in place of holes was an experience of actually being whole, W-H-O-L-E, whole. And so he was welcome to go off into the mountains. And I had become, as you said, much more normal. That had been healed in me. It was a matter of, oh, he's just going to go off into the mountains. I'll stay here. I'll see him in a few days when he comes back. It's all perfect.
You're trained as a scientist. That fundamentally defies all of the laws of science that we've been taught to believe in and build a world on. That
Yes.
when you say became, like the word became is like a process, and there's movement and there's a beginning, middle, and end. You were struck healthy. Like you were
Yes.
struck serene, and it stayed.
Yes.
Because I would be very surprised if I woke up tomorrow, like, you know, a lot of us say like, oh, I'm like a piece of Swiss cheese, you know, and like if you keep taking away my defects, like there's going to be nothing left, right? So I would be very surprised if I woke up tomorrow feeling secure, not afraid, not less than, you know, the inner critic is like driving the bus that is my life, right? I would be very shocked if that happened. But you also were struck peaceful.
Because it happened through an experience of the fullness of self. The piece that would make you anxious about the experience of no longer being anxious would be the experience of, oh my God, what happened to me? So your mind would have divided the happening as separate from the self. Something had happened to me. Someone had waved a magic wand,
Right.
fed me something, done something that changed me as separate from the happening. My experience, what happened was me. I suddenly had an experience of the truth of who I was, which was inseparable from this divine presence. And what it did was it transformed in that moment how I understood myself. One of the best ways of thinking about it is a very, very common analogy given in Vedanta of the rope and snake situation. So you see something on the ground, it's dark, you're terrified. Oh my God, it's a snake. Oh my God, it's going to kill me. Light goes on, you realize it's a rope. That thing on the floor no longer has the ability to make you afraid. You could turn off the light. You could step on it. But because you now know for certain it's a rope, not a snake, your entire relationship to it has changed forever. Kids wake up in the night screaming, there's a monster in the closet. Mom comes, turns on the light. It's a jacket on the hanger.
It's just an alien. Easy. I like that one.
Yes, that was funny. So thank you. What I was thinking was the jacket on a hanger. The child is no longer afraid. The light goes off. The kid's not going to again wake up and say, it's a monster, because the kid knows it's just a jacket on the hanger.
Don't know me.
Mayim Bialik's breakdown is supported by OneSkin.
Let me tell you about OneSkin, the skincare company on a mission to redefine aging. First of all, my favorite thing about them is they are rooted in rigorous science and research. Their products are put through the ringer with their lab and clinical trials, and we love so many of their skincare products. They basically have one for every need. I love their Lip Restore mask and full body moisturizer. That's been really saving my skin this winter, and my lips. Honestly, I've never been softer. At the core of OneSkin is their patented OS1 peptide, the first ingredient proven to target senescent cells, a key driver of wrinkles, fine lines, and loss of elasticity, all key signs of skin aging. These results have been validated in 4 different peer-reviewed clinical studies. Certified safe for sensitive skin, which I appreciate. Their products are free from over 1,500 harsh or irritating ingredients. They're dermatologist tested. They've been awarded the National Eczema Association Seal of Acceptance by the NEA, delivering powerful results without harsh side effects. All of OneSkin's products are designed to layer seamlessly or replace multiple steps in your routine, making skin health easier and smarter at every age. Founded by an all-woman team of longevity scientists with PhDs in stem cell biology, skin regeneration, and tissue engineering, OneSkin is rooted in real science and expert research. Born from over a decade of longevity research, OneSkin's OS1 peptide is proven to target the visible signs of aging, helping you unlock your healthiest skin now and as you age. For a limited time, try OneSkin with 15% off using code code BREAK at oneskin.co/break. That's 15% off oneskin.co with the code BREAK. And after you purchase, they'll ask where you heard about them. Please support our show. Tell them we sent you.
Mayim Bialik's Breakdown is supported by Odoo.
So much of what we talk about here on Mayim Bialik's Breakdown is about alignment, making sure the systems in your life actually support your authentic self and the life that you're trying to live. That includes how you run your business. Luckily, Odoo's here to help you in that journey. Odoo's an all-in-one management software designed to help entrepreneurs and small businesses focus on what actually matters instead of getting buried in admin work. They offer a range of applications for managing customer relations, marketing, point of sales, even custom websites. All that, plus your sales, accounting, inventory, and operations, all fully integrated on one simple and very easy to use, but also very intuitive platform with Odoo. When something happens in one part of your business, everything else gets updated automatically. Fewer errors, less duplication, and way more clarity is what comes from that. We also love that Odoo is scalable. As you grow, you just add what you need. No bloated software, no unnecessary complexity. Invite your whole team, keep everyone in lockstep with notifications and chat, and their plans include all their apps. Odoo is also affordable. They offer several pricing plans. Your first app's free for life with unlimited hosting and support included, and a custom domain name for the first year. Then, starting at $24.90 per month, you gain access to all available applications. Plus, it's tailored to where you live, which is amazing. Taxes, currency, and regulations are built in. Takes another huge thing off your plate. If you're ready to build a business that actually supports your well-being, you can start a free 15-day trial with Odoo or book a meeting with one of their experts to explore your ideas by visiting the link in our show notes. It's a very thoughtful platform designed to grow with you, not overwhelm you.
Use our links in the episode description for the best deals possible and get started with Odoo today.
When we talk about spiritual awakenings and we talk about people who all of a sudden start hearing a voice and they're not schizophrenic and they're not on drugs, right? And that voice they become a channel for, right? When we talk about a spiritual awakening, what happened to you is something no drug could do, no hospital could do, no healer could do. God is what filled the place that science, psychiatry, psychology, philosophy, sociology, every field has tried to tackle. Who are you? What are you here for? And why is it so painful to be a human? And most of us spend our lives at every pharmacy in town, every doctor in town, every diet in town, every plastic surgeon in town. And that's what's so fascinating to me. From a scientific perspective, nothing changed and everything changed.
Absolutely. And this is why, for me, coming from a science background, it's been such a fascinating and exciting journey, because although in that moment, everything that I thought I knew was wiped away because the experience that I had had defied everything that I thought I knew. Over the years, what's been really interesting as science has developed is to start to see so much of a very interesting overlap now with quantum science and how much it's beginning to overlap with actually what spirituality tells us. Because you listed a whole bunch of fields that did not have the ability to fix me. They got me to the place where I could manage my life. And that was exactly where I was when I went to India, and it's a place I think many of us are at, where we use, whether it's the local pharmacy, whatever it may be, but we use something external, or our minds, or a way of setting up our lives or our relationships to manage our lives, to turn the unmanageable manageable. But we've got, and I know I certainly had, a death grip on that management. So you're moving through the world with a death grip on life. And everything has to be just so because, hey, this is what you need in order to be able to manage it. And I had gotten to that place where I was managing.
You're white knuckling life.
Exactly. I was managing my food and my meals and my relationships and my school. I was taking 21 units a quarter and getting A's and managing all of that. But no one ever said, hey, you can be free. Like, this is not the highest goal. It's certainly better to manage your life than not manage it. But there is a stage, a possibility far beyond management. But all of the different schools of science that you listed can help us manage our life. But where spirituality comes in is it says, follow this path and you will actually be free, because all of this suffering is because of false identification. I mean, this is kind of core Buddhism, and I am most definitely not a Buddhist scholar or expert. I'm in the Hindu Vedic tradition, but there's a lot of overlap. The Buddha, of course, was born a Hindu. And the core teaching around life is suffering. Why? Because of our false identification and the attachment with that identification. When I had that experience on the banks of the river, it blew apart my identification. I had walked down to the river with a whole host of identities. This is who I am.
Right.
On a physical level, on a history level, on a personality level, on a neurosis level, on a success and achievement level, on a relational level. And in that moment, it wiped it all away. You are none of that. You are inseparable from this pervasive presence of the divine. And when that got wiped away, what are you gonna grab onto? There's nothing to be attached to, because the very things I was attached to no longer were me.
You open Hollywood to the Himalayas with, I believe it's your guru's, kind of example of this sort of freedom, that is waiting. And you tell a story where you're asked, are you this pen?
He says to me one day, early days, he picks up a pen and he says to me, you are not this pen. And yeah, I laughed, like, I'm a PhD student. I mean, there's a lot in the world I don't know, but I do know that I'm not the pen. And he looks at me quite seriously and he says, you laugh because you know you're not the pen, but you still identify as that physical body, as the history, as where it's come from, as what's happened to it. Even though I was no longer suffering, there was still a sense, it had come back after those first few days of just melting and merging into the energy of existence. A sense of me had reformed. And he said, you still identify as that. And he said, there will come a time when you will laugh in the same way. When I tell you you are not that body, you are not that history, as you do when I now tell you you're not the pen. And that's the core teaching of the spiritual philosophy. One of the most core mantras, prayers that we chant, says, "Oh God," or divine source, cosmic intelligence, lead us from the darkness of ignorance and illusion, the falsehood of thinking that we are this physical body that is born, that changes, that dies. And in that darkness of ignorance and falsehood, we suffer and we bring suffering to others. Lead us from that to the light of truth, in which we remember that we are that which is never born and never dies. And I know that sounds really far out and kind of hard to grasp. A way of thinking about it is, even just in this life, if you go back to the first moment that you can remember saying, I, me, or mine. Most of us were around 2. It's why we say terrible twos, is it's when the ego starts to have that sense of me, my, I. It's also when we learn no, and we learn, the difference. I am this autonomous being, separate. Then you fast forward to kind of your teenage years and you think about sometime during your teenage years when you identified I, me, mine. What did that mean to you? Where were you? Fast forward to a moment in your 20s, and you can go decade by decade. Coming back to what did I, me, mine mean to you at that time? Who was I? Who was me? What was mine? And you can go through all the decades of your life, and what you realize is what I understood as I, me, mine has changed dramatically from the time I was 2 or 3, then 11, 12, up till 54. It's changed dramatically. But the idea, the inner felt sense of I has stayed constant. There's never been a break in it. I'm just as able to go back and feel I, me, mine, even though it meant something totally different. That consistency, that thread that weaves through all the changes of the body, of the roles, of the relationships, that's that sense of I. But we believe that it isn't just in one incarnation, in one changing body, but that it actually stays life after life.
It's beautiful and very freeing. What happened when your husband went to the mountains?
Yes. He went to the mountains. I moved into Parmarth Nikatan, pre-cell phone days, or pre-us owning cell phone days. And when he came back, he was quite distressed because I had already made that ashram my home in just a few days. He wanted to be tended to in a way that my mind and attention was no longer. I was certainly excited to see him, happy to see him, but not to the extent where I was prepared to abandon that which I had just begun to experience. He wanted me to move out of the ashram, to move back into the hotel. It was a push-pull, how much is she still mine situation.
Also, he said something that many women, I think, and some men may be familiar with hearing, and he repeated it kind of a few times. He said, this is yours.
Yes.
And I don't want it to be about you.
Yes.
Like, it's always
Yes.
like, we don't know your given name, but it's always that show. And I want my own thing. I want my own guru. I don't want your guru. I don't want to rotate around you. And like, he says it a couple times, and I felt that sting of like you saying, I found something for us, and him saying, that's yours, not mine.
That had been a dynamic in our relationship. He had definitely felt like I was the attention grabber, magnet of that. And that had been an ongoing issue. And so when he arrived back from the mountains after a 10-hour journey, unwell, returned from this long odyssey, there had been an expectation, totally understandable, natural, he was my husband after all, expectation that I would drop everything for him. But because of what had happened to me over the last week spiritually,
God took away the need for you to do everything.
Exactly. I had become so anchored internally and so committed to living in this spaciousness. So when he came, I was super happy to see him, as I was also super happy to keep talking to the people that I was talking to standing in the middle of the ashram. It became this push-pull. I think that was really when he realized that this was going to be a lot more than he had bargained for. Now, it's important to mention when I had first had that experience, and in every moment up until basically when he said, either do these things or our marriage is over, it had never occurred to me that this was going to be something that separated us. I really had thought, he's on a spiritual path. He's looking for a guru. He's looking for an ashram. I have found it. It's obviously the right place. He will come to realize that as well. It will make him happy as well. After all, he was the one who had wanted this. I never thought about it as something that was going to be that or my marriage, but we had different dharmas. Our dharma was just not to be together forever. My dharma was to stay there, to walk a path of monastic renunciation. His path was to come back and start a fantastic business and get married and have 2 beautiful children and build a wonderful life for himself. So for us, that became the transition moment. But yes, so he did not take it well at all, as you can imagine. That was then when he said, you have to come with me up to Missouri. That was the Missouri half-life journey after that. He traveled around India for the next few months, sending me fax after fax, back in the days of faxes, fax after fax about the women he was sleeping with, who were, real women and able to meet him on the level that he wanted to be met by a woman.
Did that hurt in your new state? Because I'm curious, how profound was this spiritual awakening?
Yes.
Did you have jealousy? Did you have hurt? What did it feel like?
I had zero jealousy whatsoever. Zero. I was so happy. And I remember, but this had begun even earlier when he said to me, you need to come with me to Missouri or our marriage is over. I remember so vividly walking into Swamiji saying, I was cracking up, and I said, he says that if I don't go with him, our marriage is over, and I know that I should care, but I don't. And Swamiji said, go to Missouri with your husband. He made me go. Otherwise, I'm not sure if the fascination about a half-life would have been enough to actually get me to go. But with my guru now saying, you must go with him, okay. So I had zero jealousy whatsoever. What I did have, though, was still a sense that he knew me better than I knew myself, which had been the dynamic of our relationship. He was an expert in everything, including about me. And so when he said things like, this is not really a spiritual experience, and you are not really, the things that, you think have happened to you, because in my mind, he was the expert. And you need to be with me, and scathing faxes, 14, 15 pages of them, about why I was making such a mistake, why this wasn't real spirituality, why all of that which had happened to me wasn't real, etc. And I walked into Swamiji one day holding this 15-page scathing fax, and I said, I am so sorry. And I was very hurt. I said, I am so sorry. I am not really having authentic spiritual experiences. My husband has just explained to me why they're not really authentic spiritual experiences. And I've wasted all of your time.
Whoa.
And I am so sorry. And I'm going to be packing up and leaving today and going to meet my husband.
So your husband was still able to tap into
Absolutely.
that old
Yes.
software
Absolutely.
that had been installed that said, I don't know what's best for me. I don't know what's right. I'm really broken. I need a lot of help. And this is a fantasy. This is some sort of psychotic miniature break.
Well, when you said how difficult it would be for you to digest if this had happened to you, it was like that for me. After I had that first experience, and then after Swamiji sent me into the river to give up all of the anger and all of the pain that I had about the childhood sexual abuse, about the abandonment, and to really forgive, after that, I thought there is no way that what just happened. And I did something that maybe you will be one of the few people to whom this doesn't sound crazy, which is I looked for it. I thought, there is no way that I actually have just become free of all of the neurosis, all of the bulimia, all of the depression, all of the anxiety around this abuse, around this abandonment. It must still be there somewhere. And I spent the first several months trying to re-trigger myself because the bulimia went away immediately. I literally, and I was someone who, I know you've read the book, but listeners have not probably. I was not a weekend bulimic. It was not, oh, I ate too much at a party on Friday night or Wednesday night. I'm going to throw it up so that I don't gain weight. I was in and out of hospitals with tubes and IVs because I was throwing up 20 times a day. I was super, super sick. My doctor had said, this is going to kill you, literally. So it was not a joke. I was not a half-hearted bulimic. And it disappeared. I went from being someone who, as I said, was managing, white-knuckling, meals, food. I was physically getting okay, but mentally still completely wrapped up with it. I went from that to sitting in a row on the floor, cross-legged, with young, beautiful boys studying the Vedas, chanting and singing and clapping as our food is served to us out of metal buckets with big ladles that you have no idea what it is until it lands on your plate. And the rule is you have to finish everything on your plate. I had never had a rule like that. My mother was anorexic, and so we did not have a clean plate club in the house. And the idea of you must eat what's on your plate was brand new to me. And yet, I had no problem with it. Sat in this row with these beautiful people, clapping, singing, food is dumped on my plate, I'm eating whatever is served, and it literally went away. So, fast forwarding back, was he able to tap into that? He was able to tap into the pattern of thought that said, I must be wrong. I am the broken one. And I was actually on such a weird level so glad to have him now finally explain that what I thought had happened hadn't happened. So I bring it into Swamiji and I say, he has now explained to me why this was not really a spiritual experience, and I have wasted your time, and I need to leave from here and go to meet him. And Swamiji looks at me and he says it, so you believe it? He said, that's it? He says it, you believe it? And it was the very first time that it had ever occurred to me there was an alternative. That he actually could say something and I might not believe it. That he actually might not be the authority or expert on my life or my experiences. But I had never actually thought about that. And so Swamiji says, months of deep, powerful, real experiences of God and one bitter husband is going to make you doubt all of that. I exhaled and laughed and realized, of course, how I had gotten caught up in the illusion, in the drama, in the story, in the ease of giving away my power to someone who was all too happy to be the expert of me.
Also, that's a trauma response.
Of course.
It's fawning. I mean, essentially what we're doing when we give away that power is we're saying, as long as I don't upset the apple cart, none will fall out. And it's a fawning response. It's, even if you're hurting me, don't leave.
Eventually, of course, there was an ultimatum of come and meet me in this place or our marriage is over. And by that time, it was a couple months later, I had gotten to the point of realizing that what I had found was so much realer, truer, deeper than anything I had ever experienced in my life, that although I really loved him and wanted to stay with him, if this was how it was meant to be, so be it. And yeah, there was not one moment of jealousy, as crazy as that sounds, not even a moment. All I wanted was him to be happy. Was just, oh God, make him stop suffering.
And you give a dedication to him
Yeah.
in the book. Like that truly, like that's what it's like to see that piece through.
From the time that you have this unbelievable experience on the banks of the river, you're now in this state of ecstasy. Have you met your guru yet? What was the moment where you see this man that ultimately you dedicate your life and he supports you on your new path?
Yeah, we've jumped all around the plot, which is actually fun and beautiful because the journey, although it has a plot, is so much more than the plot. So it's fun to jump around. But yes, so on a plot sequence, I come to Rishikesh, have this incredible experience of transformation and awakening on the banks of the Ganga. First day that we got there. About a week later, I finally met Swamiji, who would become my guru. For the first week, I was going down, we were staying in a hotel, and I was going down to the river every day, having these incredible experiences. During that week, I had walked through Parmarth Nikatan as just a pathway to get back to the hotel we were staying in, and had heard a voice, hence the reference, that said, you must stay here. And in my entire sphere of reference, the only people who heard voices were schizophrenics and Joan of Arc. And I was certainly not Joan of Arc and certainly hoped I was not schizophrenic. And so I ignored it. And I kept walking. And I heard it again. And I looked around me. And there was no one. And it did not sound like an inner voice. It sounded to me like someone from outside had spoken. And I look around and no one. And I was just about to ignore it for the second time when I remembered the vow I had taken on the airplane to keep my heart open. And the other side of the vow was, if I couldn't keep my heart open, that I was going to go back to California. That even though I had not registered for this semester of my PhD program, I could still easily start to get practicum units. I could start to put together my research and dissertation. There was a lot of work I could do that was meaningful. And so I had created this situation by this vow in which either I had to keep my heart open or I had to get back to Delhi and get on a flight to San Francisco, because I've always been very tough with myself, especially around truth. And I don't let myself off the hook around truth. And so there was no way that I was going to pretend I hadn't taken the vow, pretend that I forgot about the vow, pretend that I hadn't heard the voice. And so when I heard it the second time and remembered the vow, I thought, all right, well, I don't want to go back to America. And I looked up and I saw a sign that said office. And I went in and said, I want to stay. I obviously did not tell them I've heard a voice. And they said that I needed to meet the president. Parmarth Nikatan now is one of the largest interfaith, international religious centers of India. We have 1,000 rooms. We are, the place that when King Charles, then Prince Charles, lands in India, that he comes to first with Camilla. It's a very, very internationally renowned place. But it's very traditional, and 30 years ago, it was super traditional. It was founded in 1942, and it's a very old traditional lineage. And at that time, you could not be a random foreign girl who just, walks in and says, hey, I want a room.
Like a white girl from America.
Exactly. So you needed permission. And nobody there was going to grant me permission. And they said I needed permission from the president. And he was currently out. And so I said, well, when is he coming back? And they said, maybe tomorrow. Which, not knowing Indian culture the way that I now do.
Could be 2 months.
Now I know that. Now I know that it really meant, I actually don't have any idea, but I'm going to say something that sounds good and hopefully you'll be happy hearing it and then you'll go away. I actually thought it meant maybe tomorrow.
It's called how we communicate all the time.
Well, you guys are going to fit in perfectly in India then. So I came back the next day and I said, is he back? And they said, maybe tomorrow. And this went on for many days. And finally he came. And in my mind, I had pictured president, a guy in a suit and tie with a briefcase who was going to
review your
judge
file.
the merits of my worthiness
Petition.
In some way. Right. And it had never occurred to me that he was this incredible spiritual master. And so when I get brought in to see him, expecting to see a man in a tie at a desk, and instead I see this saffron robe clad extraordinary being of light sitting on the floor at the front of a room surrounded by lots and lots and lots of people. It was most definitely not the scene I had been expecting. And immediately, though, I felt this incredible presence of love. But of love that was not centered. It was not the, oh, I saw you across a crowded room type of love. It was a love that just pervaded. It was like I had stepped into an ocean and y'all get wet. And everybody who walks into the ocean, gets wet, not by any merit of their own, but because the ocean is wet. And I walked in and I could just feel this presence of love. And finally, we get to go up and meet him. And I explain that I want to stay. I also don't tell him I've heard a voice. And he says, welcome home. He says, I am going to be here for the next week, and then I'm going to be leaving to go out of town again. But he said, don't worry, I'll tell them to give you a room. You're always welcome. This is home. And I walk out, still thinking I was going to go off to the mountains with my husband. And I get right into the middle of the ashram where we have this hand pump that's the central pathway of the ashram. And I'm just about to turn to go out toward the hotel. And my feet literally get stuck to the ground of the ashram. And I look down and I feel like I've stepped in crazy glue or quicksand or chewing gum or something. And there's nothing. And I'm barefoot, so I would feel it if there were. Nothing is there. But I can't pick up my feet. And I then think, oh my God, I've contracted some awful disease. Like one of those vaccinations I got didn't work and I've got polio or I've got tetanus or I've got some awful disease. And then I realize, diseases probably don't come on like this. I had no pain. It wasn't that I had lost feeling. I just couldn't pick them up. And I then think, all right, maybe they've just fallen asleep. I was sitting on the ground. I'm not used to sitting on the ground.
That's not how feet work, though.
Exactly.
But you're trying to
of course,
make sense
I'm
of it.
trying to make sense of why can't I pick my feet up off the ground? There's nothing on the ground, and why can't I move them? And you've got to picture the scene. I'm in this huge ashram, center of the ashram, white girl from America, of whom there were very, very few those days in all of Rishikesh, none in the ashram. And I'm flailing my arms. I mean, as it is, I attract a lot of attention, just the fact that I was young and white. But now I'm literally flailing my arms, trying to move. And my legs, I can't move them. Cannot pick my feet up off the ground. And a few moments later, a group of kids comes running down the central pathway, just playing tag. And instinctively, I move back. And I realize, oh, I'm free. I can walk. But I cannot move forward. And the scientist in me then says, a moment I'll always be proud of, says, well then, okay, we have just walked backwards. You must have some illness in which you can only walk backwards.
Did you try to turn around?
I did. That's exactly what I did.
That's
exactly what I did. I was like, I will just spin around and walk out of this ashram backwards. And so I spin around and cannot move in that direction. And my mind says, all right, we've just eliminated 3 of 4 possibilities. You cannot walk out of the ashram either facing forward or facing backwards. We know that you can move away from the gate, moving backwards, because I had just done it when the kids ran by. Can you move back in the direction of Swamiji's room, facing forward? Because I now was facing forward. I had spun around to walk out backwards.
This is very scientific of you.
Exactly. But literally, I mean, this was how my brain works. Every
yes.
possibility. And I mean, I had already tried to activate the whole neuroscientist in me to get the legs to lift up. I had really tried to picture the whole thing in my brain.
For the amateurs out there, there's not a part of the brain that controls backwards walking
right,
versus forwards walking.
Obviously.
No, and when I first was reading this in the book, I was thinking like, oh, which reticular,
Yes.
Where's it going through the pons and how is it? But I was like, no.
But for those of us who have been overeducated, it's our default mechanism. I'm going to figure this out. There must be a rational scientific explanation to this, because if not, it doesn't exist. We live within the confines of, if it can be measured, if it's got a size, a weight, an area, a volume, if you can see it under a microscope or in a telescope, if you can cook it in a crucible on a Bunsen burner, it exists. And if not, then it doesn't. So my intellectual, educated brain was trying to sort this thing out rather than just surrender to it, which of course is what spirituality teaches us, is science is great for everything that can fit in a beaker or be seen with a telescope or microscope. And there is an entire scope of existence out there, including something as basic as love, that you cannot measure, but that no one doubts exists. And what spirituality helps us learn, and what it took me a while to learn, is these are the moments where you just surrender, because there is no figuring it out. The mind cannot work beyond the mind. And if you're having an experience of heart, of spirit, of soul, the mind cannot do it. The mind only can function in something that is separate from it. If you can hold something at an arm's length, a checkbook, a balance sheet, a map, a list of pros and cons, another human being who I'm going to objectify on the basis of looks or gender or what they're wearing, mind can do that. But the mind cannot do self. And those are moments where it requires surrender. So still in my brain at that moment, I realize, okay, well, so the only possible explanation remaining is that I'm supposed to walk forward back in the direction I just came from. And of course I could easily. So I walk back into Swamiji's room, and all of, maybe 5-6 minutes have passed since I walked out, telling him that we were going to go off to the mountains and I would come when we got back, even though he wasn't going to be there. And I walk back in and say, I think I'm supposed to stay now. And he says, welcome. So that's the chronology of it.
I want to pull out for a second and explore, what do you think was happening? If you have to put a meaning to it. And some of the ideas that initially come up for me are, there's some sort of God force that has a plan for you that you don't know about, that is guiding you or in some ways controlling you because you weren't able to make a choice that your mind wanted to make. And if that is the case, to what end? Meaning, is it simply so that you could have the experience of this unbelievable divine transformation, removing the ways in which that you had experienced addiction and suffering and trauma? Is it to be a messenger? Like, why is this happening to you, and what sense do you make of it as it relates to all the other suffering in the universe?
Great question. This is what we talk about as Dharma. I definitely see it as a divine force energy, but you could also simply call it universal intelligence. Interchangeable. You don't have to believe in the presence of a divine who actually interferes in our life. You can simply think about it as the same intelligence through which a caterpillar at some point stops crawling on the ground and climbs a tree and then goes on a branch and weaves a cocoon and sits in the cocoon for a stipulated period of time and then breaks free and somehow miraculously knows how to fly even though it's never flown. You could think about it as the same wisdom in which a seed underground waits until the ground is no longer frosted over from winter, until it's soft enough in summer to actually sprout, because somewhere there's an intelligence that says, if I try to sprout now in a cold, hard, frosted ground of winter, I'm going to die as I try to break through the ground. So there is an intelligence in nature.
And it's not necessarily an anthropomorphized
No,
intelligence.
not at all.
That's not what we're talking about, that like seeds are thinking. That's not the point.
No, it's a sign, it's a signal. I'm not saying that, in the cerebral cortex of the seed, it makes a decision. But there is an intelligence through which it all operates. And in some species, it's going to arise as just a chemical signal. Maybe it's a sign. Who knows? I have no idea how the caterpillar knows when to get up off the ground and climb the tree. But it knows. And that is the same divine intelligence that I think of as that which gave me the voice that said, you must stay here, the experience of not being able to walk out of the ashram. All of these experiences were to push me toward walking my Dharma, my purpose. And we all come onto earth with Dharma, with a purpose. And those purposes on what you could consider universal Dharma is all the same. Every single one of us is here with the highest purpose being to realize experientially the truth of who we are, to wake up out of the illusion, out of the narrative, out of the story of my drama, my history, my body, my relationships, my bank account, into the truth of soul, spirit, consciousness, one, whatever word we use. But then we all also have individual dharmas. And this is where you have so many situations where parents or teachers or culture tries to make musicians be business people. And no matter what a good business person they may be, they are miserable. Or I see it so frequently in Indian families, tries to, turn so many people into doctors or engineers who want to be artists or want to be musicians or want to be kindergarten teachers or gardeners or whatever. When we are not living our highest truth, there is suffering. So I think that the purpose is twofold. I think the purpose was on the individual level of let me find my purpose. But I also hope that the bigger picture was through that my purpose, my Dharma was not just I should stop suffering, not just I should overcome my identification as a survivor of abuse and abandonment, as someone who was depressed and addicted, but that actually through that experience, I should help others. And that's been the exquisiteness and the incredible joy of going from someone who just had her own healing to actually being able to be someone who shares and who offers and who can teach tools and techniques and ways of coming into presence that enable others to be healed. Because my journey, my Dharma was to go literally from Hollywood to the Himalayas. But you don't have to take that journey.
Come home to yourself is sort of that next level of teaching with much more specifics. What are the actual tools? What's the actual practice look like? Because like, oh, this is all fine and good. But the question that I have, is somewhat of a cynical one, but I think it's one that I'd love for you to speak to. We can't guarantee that everyone's going to have a spiritual awakening. Like, you could take 1 million people, you could put them in the same water that you stood in. It's not like that's the formula, right? Like, if it was, we would have figured it out thousands of years ago, and that would have been
importing the water.
We'd be importing the water, and people would be selling it. It would be fake. It would be a whole thing. I also want you to help us understand, are there those of us who do not have that Dharma to have that spiritual awakening, and are we just sort of left to find the people who have and go to them? There's a bit of envy, that I have, because I kind of feel like, gosh, if there's a solution, I want it. Like, it's not even like they found a pill for you. You changed your consciousness and it changed your life, right? Or God, grace, right? The crack, which is how the light gets in, right? Allowed grace in. What is it about other people's experience, or for those of us who may not be on track to have a spiritual awakening, how do we get there?
I do believe it's available for everybody. Absolutely. However, as I mentioned, we do believe in many lifetimes. And so one of the things that I share a lot is the universe is infinitely patient. There's a beautiful metaphor that I've heard many different speakers and teachers give that says, imagine that there is a mountain that is 1 mile long and 1 mile high. And once every 100 years, a bird flies by the mountain with a silk scarf in its beak, and it rubs the silk scarf against the side of the mountain once every 100 years. The amount of time that it's going to take that bird with that silk scarf to erode the mountain is how long we've been coming back over and over and doing this. So the universe is infinitely patient. You're not going to have the awakening this life? No problem. However, and that's speaking from the universe perspective.
Easy to say, you've had a spiritual awakening.
Well, but that's where it's available for everybody. But what you have to realize is the universe isn't impatient. If we're impatient, fantastic, because it's actually about letting go. From what I've seen in my life and what I've seen in the life of so many people is that standing between us and a spiritual awakening experience is not what we don't have, but what we're holding on to. We have to be prepared to let go of anger, of grudges. If I was not prepared to walk into the river and let go of the anger and the pain that had identified me, I would not be here today. There is a surrender. I talk about it as a trust fall into the universe. We hold on to our stories because they're all we know. yes, I'm this neurotic being. Yes, I'm this depressed being. Yes, I'm the one in this bad relationship. Yes, I'm the one with this awful job. Yes. And we hold on to it because to let it go, well, who would I be then? And whether it's how I identify in my body, whether it's my color, whether it's my race, whether it's what's happened to me, my history, whether it's my beauty or lack thereof, whatever it may be, or whether it's my relationships, my career, my bank account, we identify as all of that. That which is standing between us and the awakening is that identification. What's required is a willingness to be open to the possibility that that's not who you are, and that is just where your physical body is at this intersection of time and space. If you're driving down the road and I call you and I say, "Who are you?" and you say, "I'm exit 51. I'm going to say, no, I didn't say, "Where are you?" I said, "Who are you?" And if then you say, "Oh, I'm exit 52, I'm going to think that either you can't hear me or you've lost your marbles. Because we know intuitively I'm not where my car has reached on the freeway. But for me to say I am a 54-year-old female American-born monk in India is like saying I'm exit 51. That's where this body, this has gotten to at this intersection of time and space. The letting go of that and the trust falling into, I don't know who I would be, but holding on to these identities is causing me suffering. And I am prepared to let go of my anger, of my grudges, of my unfulfilled expectations, of my attachments, of my visions of how things should be, of who I am, of what the universe is, of what my role in the universe is. And then we step into the river, either the literal river of Ganga or any sacred place. You know, there is something, it's worth a moment of caveat here. There is something about sacred places.
Yep.
And no, it doesn't have to be only Ganga. And there is a reason why for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, that is a place to which rishis and sages and yogis have gone and have meditated and have done their yoga and have attained enlightenment. And every religion has sacred, holy energy places. Nature is a sacred energy place. But I do think that there is something really powerful about being in a holy, sacred place. We are energetic beings. We think that we're very solid, but if you look at us under an electron microscope, suddenly all of that would disappear. We are impacted very deeply by the energy around us, whether it's something as simple as heat or sunshine or something much more subtle. And being in a sacred place, I think, allows the energy of us to align in a way that gives us, I think, a courage to see beyond what we're used to seeing. So I think that's an important piece, but it doesn't have to happen there, of course. It doesn't have to start in Hollywood. It doesn't have to end in the Himalayas. It's what I speak about as a mindset shift. And it's that mindset shift from I am this body, I am this story, to, oh, I have a body. It's not a denigration of the body. It's not a denial of the body. But it's an awareness that I'm not it. What I am is soul, spirit, cosmic intelligence, source, consciousness, whatever word we use. So everyone can have it in this life. It is absolutely available to everyone. I believe that. But we're coming into this world with different karmic packages. And so it's going to be easier for some than others. I was given an experience that made something that otherwise I think would have been very difficult, if not impossible, suddenly very, very possible. But it's something that's available for everybody. And again, the universe is very patient. So I'd say if it's not happening yet, ask yourself, what is it I'm holding on to that's keeping me from seeing truth? And do whatever you can to put yourself in places where the energy is aligned. I mean, if you wanted to get a suntan, you'd be much more likely to get a fast suntan at the top of a mountain than at the base of a mountain. We understand that the sun's rays are stronger at the top of the mountain than the base of the mountain. In the same way, if you want to have that energy, to the extent that you can be in places where the energy aligns, fantastic. And we have so many stories throughout history of people having spontaneous divine experiences everywhere. So there's no rule that it has to be there.
On the top of a lot of mountains. Maybe they were trying to get suntans.
I want to talk about the actual physical process of letting go.
Yes.
Because a lot of people listening to this are going to hear this notion of you just have to let go. And, they are trauma informed.
Yes.
They've had these experiences. They've been told, well, my nervous system reacts like this because of this pattern, and they understand the science that goes beyond it. So it's like they may be listening and saying, I can't just let go because I have this physiological response. It's not so easy. And so that's the first part of the question. The second part of the question is really about place, which I want to circle back to. But before that, can you talk about the process of what it was like? Because you had profound experiences that not only had shaped your narrative, but you were having really intense physical reactions to those pieces of your history as well.
An important piece of the story that I mentioned, but it's, I think, really worthy of reiterating, is I had done a lot of psychological work prior to this moment. And that's important to reiterate and to really emphasize, because otherwise you end up with a spiritual bypassing situation or you end up with people simply saying, I can't do it because I've experienced trauma. I had spent years in a variety of different forms of therapy, working with the trauma, working with the way the trauma had manifested in me through the eating disorder, through depression, through so many different aspects of my life. And therefore, by the time I came to India, I was at a point where I understood it all. Cognitively, exactly. Had gone into it, even emotionally, had gone deep into it, had relived it, had
But you were
seen
still
it,
carrying it somehow.
But I was definitely still carrying it, for sure. And I used to laugh and joke that I could write a book about why I was bulimic. But I couldn't stop myself from doing it. I had all of the awareness, but that didn't shift the behavior.
And you talk about 12-step programs, which basically say the only power that can relieve you of this is God. Because on our own, we can't.
And yet, staying in the conversation around Dharma, at that time when I was in the 12-step programs, I wasn't able to access the presence of the divine. I was an utter failure at the 12-step programs because I would just keep throwing up, saying, oh, well, my higher power didn't come to me today. And anyway, I've, already admitted that I have no power, and so it's up to my higher power, and he didn't show up, so here we are. So I kind of got essentially kicked out of the 12-step programs because
it wasn't working
for me. So you have to be at a point in your life where you are open to that presence of the divine, which at the height of my addiction, I was not.
And just to clarify, if the program's not working for you, that doesn't mean that you get kicked out. I was clarifying the previous point. I don't want people to hear that and think like, oh, if you don't, plenty of people don't have a higher power, keep struggling, come to meetings drunk, as it were. So just wanted to clarify.
Yes, good. Thank you. Absolutely. I had done years and years and years of that psychological work. So when you talk about people who are listening, who are trauma-informed, who are experiencing that, who say, I can't just let go, what I would say is Western psychology is fantastic at helping us understand our patterns, helping us understand our triggers, helping us understand why we are the way we are, understand our neuroses. And if there has been trauma in your life, to look at that, to acknowledge that, to understand it, to see how you get triggered, how it impacts your life today, is of a huge amount of importance. Letting go does not mean that we deny that we suppress it, that we repress it. However, many, many, many people get to the place where I was, which is I've done all that. I've seen this trauma. I have relived this trauma umpteen times in everything ranging from basic therapy to holotropic breath work to, people were not using psychedelics, or at least nobody I knew was at that time, but holotropic breath work and a whole variety of different forms of therapy. Seen it, understand it, know it, relived it, working with it, but not free of it. Still, my mind, my thoughts, and my behaviors were still governed by the trauma and the reaction to the trauma. And what spirituality did was allow me to become free. So the letting go was saying, that happened. That was awful. That should not have happened. And it didn't actually happen to me. And that's tricky, because that could be co-opted in a spiritual bypass sort of situation. But what I mean by it is the me who presented to my guru at 25 did not share one cell of her body with the me who was abused or abandoned. If he had said to me, show me, when he sent me into that river to let go, it had begun with a conversation that's in Hollywood to the Himalayas, but I didn't share it here, which is worth mentioning for a moment, in which I had asked him. The reason I got sent into the river to let go was I had asked him about fear. And he said, you fear because you don't trust. And I then told him my story.
This is why I don't trust.
This is why I don't trust. Hey, here's all the awful things that have happened to me. You
wouldn't trust either if you had been through what I went through.
Exactly. Here's why I know the universe is untrustworthy. And he looked at me and he said, are you going to take that to the grave?
He also said, how long are you going to keep talking about it?
Yeah, that was about a year and a half later, which was another step.
Yes.
But that was also so important, because it was this slap in the face of, oh, I thought I was done.
Because it was still part of your nomenclature. It was still part of who you were.
Yep, absolutely. So in that first moment, he says, are you going to take this to the grave? And I say no. And he says, so are you going to let it go on your deathbed? Like, God, no. I was 25. And he says, so are you going to let it go a month before you die? Maybe a week before you die? And I say, no. I'm in process. This is a process, there's a process to these things. And he looks at me and he says, you're waiting for someone to come in and draw the line. You're waiting for someone to come in and tell you that you can be done. He said, no one will. You can carry this story to your grave. You can let it go on your deathbed, or you can let it go tonight. It's like, tonight? Tonight? And he said, yes, I want you to go and stand in the river after our sacred lighting ceremony, the Arati. And I want you to stand in the river, the sacred Ganga River, the mother goddess Ganga. And I want you to offer all of your anger, all of your pain to her, to the river. Let her take it and forgive him. And I walked out of there thinking, thank God I live somewhere where we understand process and that we don't have to rely on a river to sweep away our problems, because in the 25-year-old, overeducated, over-indoctrinated, super arrogant, academically arrogant me, I thought there is no way.
You don't just give it away.
Of course.
It's not like a thing.
No, there's a
that you get rid
process.
of.
There's
Right.
a process.
So you don't believe it's going to work.
I do not believe
but
it's
you're going to
gonna
go
work.
and you're going to give it your best shot.
Open heart vow.
Open heart vow, and a second vow built on that later that afternoon, which was a very simple vow of sincerity. And it was remembering my open-hearted vow that took me to that. I was like, okay, if you're just going to sit here and be smug and arrogant and obnoxious about the whole thing, you need to go back to America, because this is not an open heart. And I then made a commitment that I would be sincere. I knew it wasn't going to work, because I knew, of course, rivers don't sweep away this kind of stuff. But I would be sincere, I would be open, I would be willing. And that was all I committed to. And I walked in that river, and I prayed and cried and tried to find within me every memory, every vision, every experience that brought about anger and pain. And I held water from the river in my hands, and I offered it into the water in my hands. And I then offered the water like this back into the river. And I did that until I could actually see his face and say, I forgive you. And see a man who was not the monster of my childhood memories, but a haunted man who was, I wouldn't have used these words at that time, but in retrospect, walking his own karmic journey with his own karmic package in this lifetime.
And just to clarify, this is the man who created you. With
Yeah, this
your
was my
mother.
biological father. This was my biological father, absolutely. I hesitate in short form to say that only because I was given the most amazingly wonderful dad afterwards. And so everyone who knows me knows Frank as my dad. And I never would want anybody missing a moment to think that he was the one. But yes, this was my biological father, Manny. And I stood there until I could see his face and forgive him. And that's the letting go that I speak about. It's a willingness, an openness, a sincerity to let go and see what happens.
And what was it in that moment? Was there another profound change like the first spiritual awakening, or was it more like a lightening that you noticed hours, days after?
It was not like the first moment at all. It was deeply profound. It was an emptying. It was definitely an emptying.
Did you realize it worked in the moment? Was that skeptical young woman
Both.
changed?
I definitely felt empty. I felt free as I walked out of the river. And as I walked out, a voice was like, well, that didn't really happen. My heart knew it, but there was still this overeducated part of my brain that thought, there's no way that just happened.
Because rivers don't do that.
Rivers don't do that. And I then did something very funny, as I mentioned, which is I kept looking for it. I spent the next few months trying to trigger myself.
And you were like, there's this part of myself that's missing that I'm used to having.
Exactly.
Well, and it was also a question of like, what if I look at a Hostess cupcake? Like, what if? What if I, insert the thing, right? Insert the drug, drive by the bar, pour the drink, smell the drink, look at the porn. Like, what is going to activate you?
Yep. What is going to cause that level of suffering in me? And that the bulimia had been a way of not feeling. And what I found was the memories were all still there. I could remember everything, But the attachment between the memory and the emotional response of needing to get out of that moment was no longer there.
This is the definition of what EMDR does, which is a trauma therapy. That's literally like what it says on the label of EMDR. When you do MDR, trauma processing, that's the goal, right? So science is trying to find what is it that happens when we can uncouple the cognitive and literal experience of trauma, the words, the thoughts, and we can uncouple them from the response, which is a compensatory response. It's a survival response. When we uncouple them, which is what, again, science is trying to match, that is the goal, that it no longer has that power. It's not that it doesn't exist. It's that it no longer holds that charge. It's kind of like, when you see an ex that you've recently broken up with and it still hurts and you still have longing, and there comes a point when you have some realization like they weren't good for me. And when you see them, you don't want it anymore. Or if you give up sugar, right? Like I lost my taste for soda, which, it doesn't taste right anymore, right? We're uncoupling that.
When we say let go, and as you mentioned that you have a lot of people who listen who are trauma informed, so I just want to really clarify this. The letting go is not a denial of what's happened. It's not a belittling of what has happened. It's not in any way, shape, or form saying that was okay.
And the same for forgiveness.
Of course. What it's saying is, and forgiveness is a critical part.
Correct.
They're interlinked
you describe it so
in a
beautifully.
huge way. Is what it's saying is that happened. It was awful. And yet you deserve to be free. And in order to be free, you need to let go of that as the identification of self. And one of the ways of thinking about it on a physical level is if the trauma happened more than 7 or 8 years ago, there's literally not a cell of your being today that existed then. So if in that moment Swamiji had said to me, oh, you were sexually abused? Who was sexually abused? Show it to me. Oh, you were abandoned? Who was abandoned? Show her to me. There's not a cell of my 25-year-old body that was in existence then. Every cell of our body constantly is regenerating. Skin cells are every few days, internal organs every 7-8 years. But within 7, 8, 9 years, every cell of our body has regenerated. So if we are carrying this happened to me, it's a really interesting pathway to stop and say, to whom? Should never have happened. There should be lots of love and tender compassion for the being to whom it happened. We are not negating her, forgetting her, abandoning her, telling her it's her fault. We're doing none of that. But we're simply saying, she's not me. So that's on one level. The other level of the letting go is on the deep level of soul. So it's not just she's not me on a physical level, but it's that happened as part of a karmic journey of this, my soul in this lifetime. It was awful. And it isn't the core truth of who I am, which is soul and has this experience and that experience and this experience. But ultimately, the truth is that which is unchanging, like that experience that I was mentioning earlier. You think about when you were 2 or 3, then when you're in your teens, then in your 20s. That through line, that's the unchanged part. And so the letting go is an awareness that there is a me who was never touched, never traumatized, never harmed, both on a physical level now, but even deeper on the level of soul, spirit, consciousness, and tapping into that.
And also the notion of a higher self.
Yes.
That even when you, and that's sort of the psychology, right? Internal family systems concept, that even if you are revisiting abuse, trauma, there's a part of you that always knew, even if you can't consciously access it, there's always a part of you that knew you don't deserve this. You didn't do anything wrong. You're not bad. It's the part that is closest, and I'm pointing to the crown of my head because this is the closest place that connects, right? It's the closest place to the divine, is the one that knows it can't touch you, you know, and especially like when you can remove yourself from that timeline, it can't touch you anymore. There are obviously many possibilities for the way people might analyze what happened. We talked about, is this schizophrenia? We think we ruled that out. And, you know, many materialists would say, and this is not my perspective, nor I think Jonathan's or anyone in this room or probably even listening, but some people, some cynics might say you had some sort of delusional experience, which the DSM has not yet decided what it is.
Yes.
You know, it's some sort of like, you know, religious, I mean, again, I'm using harsh words, some sort of like religious fanaticism, psychosis, and it's delusional, and we don't know. We're going to set that aside, right? And we can't quantify. I can't tell you what that voice was any more than you can tell me what that voice was, right? That told you must stay here. But a very large component, and I think this has been sensationalized significantly in our current culture, is the notion of cults, the notion of guru, the notion of a charismatic spiritual leader who in many cases, and it's how kind of we all got here, is charismatic religious and spiritual leaders who I believe their words have been twisted in many ways, but they have carried people through hard times, complicated wars, poverty, you know, all these things. This is like how we get here. Religion exists, right? And I believe that there's just sort of one, and there's different cultural understandings of what that one is, but there's just kind of a one. But when we think of all the documentaries, right, about the abuse of power, and in particular, there's been recent documentaries specifically about, you know, some of the communities surrounding yogic practices and things like this. It's a very deep spiritual connection. I'm not saying there's anything specific about yogic traditions or Eastern traditions, but there is something to a practice that is so intimate. And so, especially when you get into Kundalini yoga, it is so rooted in these core, you know, primal needs we have for connection that I think in many ways can make us susceptible, right? Even more than other practices. And I've never heard anyone speak as frankly as you do about the deep love that you felt and received from your guru. And you even go so far as to say, I would have done anything that he asked. To what level can you help us understand, you know, the proportion of that love, that spiritual love you have for a leader versus I'm a disciple of a tradition that I'm going to pass on? And I'm asking you, you know, especially because you were born and raised in a culture that is so confused about love, about sex, about desire. What can you tell us about the love for a guru?
First of all, on a general level, as we are in the midst of so many scandalous stories, and I've been, as you can imagine, approached by so many people in different communities that have been wrought with scandal, who are bereft and devastated and shattered and prepared to give up the teachings because of what has been unveiled about the teacher, the guru from whom they learned it. And what I've told every one of them is, you know what? The universe can send perfect teachings through an imperfect vessel. And I think that's a really important piece to remember, is that the vessels are human. Some of them are at a much higher level than others, and therefore are what we could consider safe vessels. Some of them are not. And it's not that they intended to bring harm, but I think a lot of these masters who may have had spontaneous spiritual experiences, may have developed spontaneously a system that they've been able to pass on, or some wisdom they've passed on, but who haven't come from a powerful guru themselves, can find themselves in a situation surrounded by adoring, doting disciples of a culture that doesn't think there's anything wrong with having sex with the guru, and suddenly be in a situation of temptation that they may never have even imagined. So I think, A, it's important to remember.
And that's an abuse of power also.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But I'm just beginning with the idea that I don't think the majority of them went into this plotting, planning, calculating to be a guru so that they could abuse the power they get and molest people for sex. I think that in most cases, what began as a sincere desire to share a teaching that they had, but in which they didn't have the foundation of maybe a very deep spiritual practice personally, or a guru who could say to them, hey, you're off track, have gotten tempted and triggered into abusing power, into taking advantage, because, desire is a super difficult experience to withstand. So in any case, I just want to begin by saying I think it's important to realize that just because we have unveiled several teachers who were not nearly as perfect as they would have had us believe, and who did abuse power and did abuse people and were absolutely acting out of integrity, out of Dharma, that shouldn't make the disciples doubt the teachings themselves.
And this is a place that I was hoping you'd speak to, because many people say, see, religion's bullshit, because look what happens when people in power, but I think the idea is you want to be able to separate that. I think that's a very important distinction.
Otherwise we'd never send our kids to school, right? I mean, there are stories of teachers who molest kids. There are stories of doctors who molest patients on operating tables. We have every system that we can think of has abuse, because every system that is populated by humans is going to be impacted by human nature. And so we have teachers, principals, coaches, doctors who have taken advantage of students' patients. But we would never say, forget education, forget the practice of medicine, forget surgery. We understand there is a value that transcends the harm brought by those individuals. Obviously, those individuals need to be dealt with separately. Obviously, we need to increase our screening processes, but you would not throw the entire system of medicine or education out the window.
I want you to speak to celibacy, because you dedicate a certain portion of Hollywood to the Himalayas to explaining, that in true practice, there is a shift in chemistry and there's a shift in biology that can be instated. I always thought that celibate people were walking around like freaking out, but the idea and you
many of them are
right, but you talk about what it's like,
yeah,
and you talk about that there are three places energy can go, right? Talk a little bit about what that means. And, I'm not asking for lascivious purposes. I'm asking because I think it's a fascinating component of a practice that is focused on what does it look like to not be attached, right, to those desires.
Absolutely. And for me, I never would have dreamed in a million years that I was going to become celibate. I was not someone you would have anticipated would be celibate. I was not someone who was raised in a family, a culture, a society that valued really abstinence at all from anything that one might want. So there was nothing in my life that would have indicated that I was going to take a path of renunciation at all, and certainly not of sex or pleasure in that way.
And also for a woman, it implies you will not biologically
Of course.
squeeze a watermelon through
Yes.
a garden hose.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
So what happened for me was also really a piece of grace. I do not believe that I would have been able from the beginning to be celibate if I was still flooded with sexual urges. Remember, I had never meditated. I had never done any spiritual practices. I was not walking into this as a powerful student of abstinence or working with your mind in any way. But what happened was really amazing. Not long after I had the very first experience of awakening on the banks of Ganga, it felt very much like the divine came through me with a dustbuster or one of those vacuum cleaners with the attachments, the long attachments that get into your corners, and literally sucked out of me the attachment to anything that was no longer going to be a part of my life. And whether it was bagels or avocados or sex, I mean, it literally was this spectrum of here are the things I enjoy. Here are the things I'm no longer going to have. Okay.
Why can't you have a bagel?
Well, they just didn't have them. I mean, now there may be places that have bagels. Now there are
I'd
places
be importing
that
It's the water. The water in New York. It's a different kind of holy water.
So many things. I mean, if I looked at the things that I used to consume on every level, salad bars.
As a woman, makeup, like, all the niceties of Western culture for women, right?
Any of it. It was no longer going to be part of my life. Bagels, avocados, sex were kind of the three big things for me, but the list was obviously much longer. A lot longer. And because of the power of that experience, it literally felt like I was out that attachment to them. Otherwise, if I was living that life, dreaming about sex, I don't think that I would have stayed because it would not have felt right. It wouldn't have felt in alignment. From that moment, the desire disappeared.
You were free.
I was free. It wasn't that I didn't have beautiful memories, but the desire just lifted. And so it became actually quite easy for me.
But has it ever been difficult?
Well, so it returned, as I do share in the book, a few years later in a moment with a very attractive Bollywood actor who mentioned that he was very attracted to me. And it was the first time in probably 5-6 years I had been there by that time that I even remembered I had the body of a woman. I mean, I had just not thought of myself in that way for all of those years. And suddenly here was this super attractive guy in front of me saying, I'm attracted to you. And what it did, although I completely deflected the comment in that moment, what it did was it opened that which had been closed in my mind, in my hormones, in everything. And I suddenly found myself flooded with desire. Fortunately, I come from a culture in which I didn't think there was something wrong with that. I didn't feel ashamed. I knew that I didn't want to give into it, that I had taken vows that I wouldn't. But I wasn't ashamed. There was no sense in me of like, oh, bad person, wrong person. And so I went to Swamiji saying, I got this problem here. And he gave me a series of practices of working with the energy. And again, fortunately, I have a guru who himself is so open in thought, although he's been a lifelong celibate, but is so open in thought that he would never say, this is wrong, this is bad, nothing like that. he told me a very funny story from our scriptures, though I won't go into the whole story, but a story of a sage who's a celibate, Narad Muni, who's a very, very renowned sage, who at one point in his life gets completely intoxicated by desire for this princess, and how the divine basically saves him from going astray by giving him a monkey face and not letting the princess be attracted to him because he's been given a monkey face. And so Swamiji tells me this story, kiddingly saying, am I going to have to turn your face into a monkey? But then he gives me some very powerful yogic practices of working with the energy and carrying it up within you. That later, interestingly, my yoga teacher from here explained that the practices that young boys are given in the ancient traditions, when they take boys at a prepubescent age, that a lot of the practices are given to actually biochemically make that energy flow upward rather than downward. But he gave me practices of working with the energy, not pushing it away, not denying it, not hating it, but also not living in this idea of, it has to be released. But it can actually be transmuted and rise in the being. And working with what I later learned were called chakras and energy centers, and using that sacred energy. So, fortunately, it has not been a major obstacle or even a minor obstacle. It's been something that has arisen a few times over the years. But these practices are so powerful. And by the way, another important caveat for your listeners is there is nothing in the scriptures that says thou shalt be celibate, unless you've taken vows for it, of course. But there's nothing that says a celibate path is the highest path. A celibate path is the only path. You can only be enlightened if you're a monk. Nothing says that. I came to realize in the first couple of years of being there that my Dharma was going to be to take these monastic vows, to become a monk, to follow this path, this lineage of my guru. But there's nothing that says that you have to do that. And in fact, interestingly, in the scriptures, the vast majority of sages, of rishis, of yogis are living household or married lives, as are the divine incarnations. Krishna comes on earth, Ram comes on earth. They're householders. They're married people. So that's a very important emphasis, that no one should think, this experience, this healing, this awakening is not available to me because I'm married or I don't want to be celibate. No problem.
And can you speak a little bit to the devotion in particular that you felt and have with your guru, kind of separate from the sexual conversation, but I know that I grouped those in one. Can you talk a little bit about, some people saying maybe she's just so taken with whoever the guru is, and this would hold for men as well. I think it's more about what kind of devotion do you grow and what kind of love grows, and how do you separate that from the other kinds of love?
Yeah, the word guru, it's very beautiful. The Sanskrit word guru literally means the one who removes our darkness and brings light.
That's a lot of words for one little word.
Isn't it? So gu is darkness. Ru is the remover of darkness. So guru is the one who removes that darkness. But I always give the extra piece that the darkness is ignorance, because those of us coming from a Judeo-Christian tradition take darkness to basically mean who I really am. If you only knew my true core self, original sin. In the Vedic tradition, the darkness just means ignorance. That the core of who we are is light, is divinity, is purity, is one with that divine. But we forget. We identify with the body, with the story. And so we live in a darkness of ignorance. The guru is the one who removes that darkness. Now, you mentioned charisma. One of the tragedies in the world is that charisma does not always mean goodness. There have been many charismatic leaders, political leaders, religious leaders of every religion, who are fantastically charismatic and are most definitely not people we should be following. In the world of religion, the gurus far too often are beings who are incredibly charismatic, and we mistake a spotlight of charisma as light of the self. And what I always remind people is the light that the guru shines is the light on you. If the guru is just shining the light on themselves and the goal is look at me, run as fast as you can in the other direction. The way to know it's a real guru is, do you feel that there is a light with which you can see yourself? Does the guru show you the truth, the light of you? And so when that happens, when he showed me, you are not broken, you are not damaged, you are divine. That was the light of me. That was not about, hey, look how charismatic I am, follow me. That was, look at you. And so the devotion is a devotion to truth. It's devotion to a path. I speak about it frequently like being a lump of clay on a potter's wheel. Not always easy. There are metaphoric slaps. He got physical slaps from his guru. Sometimes I think a physical slap would be easier than the ego slap, but I guess with Western disciples, you can't actually raise a hand and hit them. But so yeah, we only get metaphoric ones, but they're slaps to the ego. And then you get thrown in the fire and you get, the ego gets burned. But it's a devotion to truth, and a real guru is going to be the one who's going to constantly remind you it's not about me. The very first book I ever wrote is called By God's Grace, and it's his biography. And I titled it By God's Grace because when I first met him, that was all he would say. When I would say, you're so amazing, he would say, it's all God's grace. And I would say, well, yeah, but. And he just kept coming back to it. And it actually used to drive me crazy because I was thinking, take credit here, like say thanks.
The man can't take a compliment.
Right, exactly.
But it's also, that's true humility.
It's true humility, and that's exactly his felt sense experience. And I realized he was not just being humble. He was giving me the truest experience.
Okay, but you're describing falling in love with someone. Like you are.
And I did.
They make me feel things that I never felt before. I
totally fell in love with him, and I talk about it in the book, which is why not only if he had wanted me to give him more, but in my mind, I was like, well, the natural place that this is going to go is, of course, it's going to become a physical sexual relationship because when you love someone and you're that close,
and they make you feel so good,
like that's where this goes.
Which is also a bit of trauma response.
Course, absolutely.
Also, I mean, with all due respect, with all the respect,
of course it is.
For many of us, oh, you like me? Let's get married.
Absolutely.
Right? Or you're paying me attention? We must be in love. And it could be the dude at Trader Joe's. Like it could be, it could be anyone, right? Because it's my need, right? It's my God-shaped hole.
And it's how we identify our value.
Sure.
When I wrote about this in Hollywood to the Himalayas, I actually had several people prior to manuscript going to print saying, are you really sure you want to put this all in? And I thought, you know what? If I take away truth based on just what people are going to think about me, I wouldn't even know the woman who occupied my body. And I think it's a really important piece of the story because I was a 25-year-old sexually active married woman whose husband had just left her and who came from a world in which there was nothing wrong with it anyway. Right. I mean, I didn't come in with any baggage around sex. This was what you did when you loved someone.
Especially if someone amazing likes you. I better have sex with that person. It means I'm really worthy.
Exactly. And how are you going to keep them otherwise? And it was an incredible experience because I went from feeling like this is just going to be a matter of time because he's never done it before or had a relationship like this before, to a very interesting trauma-informed panic experience. Oh my God. On the one hand, he's saying, you're wonderful, you're divine. His actions are showing me that, like, he wants me to be near him. He's calling me. He's giving me work to do every day. I've been granted access to him. And yet he, no matter how much I try to flirt, make myself available, insinuate that, hey, this would be a good thing, he doesn't even understand. Like, he cannot pick up on a signal. He has no idea where I'm trying to go, and clearly is totally uninterested and sees me just as soul and keeps directing my vision back toward soul. And it was incredibly frustrating and incredibly anxiety producing for quite a while of, what do I have to offer if not this? And that is, as you said, that is the trauma response of, that's how I identify.
So many women do, even if you aren't traumatized.
Exactly. And if you don't want to have sex with me, why are you keeping me around? And my whole sense of self had to shift and grow around worthiness and value in being in this type of relationship with someone who looked at me and saw soul rather than body. And even when the body was offered, had no interest, didn't understand the question, like just was on a completely different plane of existence.
Like literally.
Literally.
What can people find in Come Home to Yourself?
So Come Home to Yourself was a really fun book to do because it's questions and answers. Hollywood to the Himalayas, or Himalayas as we say here, reads, as I've been told, which to me feels so happy, like a novel. As you said, a soap opera.
Your life is like a great novel.
Well, and I love that because what it means is that people get engaged in the story. And as you said, it's like a huge soap opera.
I didn't want it to end. I mean, yeah.
Well, fortunately, it hasn't. Just the book has. But the story is ongoing. And it was wonderful to write and to share the story along with the lessons as I learned them. So in Hollywood to the Himalayas, the lessons are woven into the story. Come Home to Yourself is transcripts of actual answers that I have given to actual questions in the satsang, the question answer session that I lead every evening there in Rishikesh. And we have people come from all over the world. And it's satsang literally means in the presence of truth. And people ask everything, ranging from the nature of the soul. What happens to the soul after death? I've lost a loved one. How do I access them, find them, deal with grief? To how do I deal with my mother-in-law? To do I have to get married? My parents say I have to get married. Do I have to get married? To how do I work with my negativity, my habits? Why meditate? If I'm a good person, why do I need a spiritual practice? To literally everything in between. And we went through and we chose the ones that are the most universally important. So across regions, across religions, across life paths, what are the things that as souls in human bodies having human experiences that we struggle with? Our relationships, our minds, our jobs, our deep questions. And that's what it is. So it's literally questions and answers. And hopefully everyone who reads it is going to find answers to the questions that they struggle with. And hopefully through those answers, that which keeps people from living as the very highest, truest self of them, freest expression of them, that those barriers can be removed.
A lot of people have little moments and glimpses of these spiritual experiences. And as you talked about the idea of a half-life, they wonder how to integrate it, right? They may experience it in an energy session or a meditation or on a retreat, and then they come back to their lives. Your life took you to the other side of the world, to an ashram where you've built a community and you're a part of something that supports this path that you're on. Can it work if you're not amongst community in that way, singing with your meals and meditating with others?
Yes.
I've spent some time living part-time in an ashram in San Francisco, and it was different when there's a group of people sitting
Absolutely.
every morning, every night. Talk to the people who may be listening who are living a suburban life or living in a city. How do they navigate and try to hold on to some of this on a regular basis?
These teachings are actually meant for what we call householders, meaning people who are living everyday lives, married, kids, jobs, in society. They're not teachings that are given to monastics living in caves. If you go through the Vedic tradition, the wisdom, you take the Bhagavad Gita, for example, it is spoken on a battlefield to a man, a father, a husband who is about to fight a battle. So they are meant for people in exactly the circumstances that you've described, living these lives in societies with jobs. And it's hard. It's much easier, absolutely, to remember, to access when you are in a community that's doing it, partly because when most of us go to those communities, it's as a vacation from our life. So there's two aspects. One is I don't have to deal with errands or punching a time card or getting my kids to school.
Banking.
Exactly, like banking. Because I'm on vacation for 3 days or 3 weeks or however long I may be there. So one is just the nitty-gritty annoyances of my daily life are not there. But then the other is I'm in a place where the energy is focused on remembering. And that's hugely powerful and hugely important. However, it's absolutely doable even without that. These days, the internet has become such a wonderful tool because even if you don't have a community on your street, you can have an online community. People are gathering online, meditating together, coming together in satsang, whether they're just watching it, like our satsang streams live every day. But people are also coming together and sharing and talking online in community. Where most people live also, there really are these days other people on the path. LA obviously is super easy. Almost every corner has people who are meditating, people who are singing kirtan, people who are engaged in some spiritual practice. It may not necessarily be exactly the same. But as you mentioned in the beginning, it's all one. They're all going to the same place. So it's not that it has to be a Bhagavad Gita study group. It could be people coming together across different spiritual, beautiful books and lineages and traditions and sharing how we access the divine and how we remember in our traditions. So I'd say open your eyes and look for it where you are. And nicely, technology also gives us ways of not only connecting online, but it actually helps people find other people offline. Use online communities as not something that you're hooked up to too frequently, because that does then just kind of pull you out of here we are right now. But it is good if you're not able to find a community where you live. And there are a select few people for whom that's true. But I have found these days that even in obscure little villages of random countries all over the world, people are meditating. People are coming together to chant, to talk about the presence of God. People are looking for spirituality these days. There is violence, there's war, there's oppression, there's division and polarization and othering and fear and destruction of our environment. And people are looking to come together in something that is united, that is deeper, that's higher. So find the community. And remember that there also is a reason, as beautiful and ecstatic as it is to sing and chant and meditate in community, there is a reason that traditionally, again, across religions, that you've got monks in caves. And that there is something very powerful about an individual practice. It just requires a different level of discipline than when you're somewhere where the bell rings at 4 a.m. every day and, everybody's got to get up and we're sitting in 15 minutes. And so it just requires a different level of discipline. But setting reminders is, for me, one of the most beautiful things in my life. And I set, for example, every time I drink something or eat something, a moment, just a moment. And if you're somebody who drives the car a lot, you could tie it into turning on the ignition. If you're somebody who sends a lot of emails, you could tie it into hitting send. A moment, 30 seconds of just dropping in. Ah, yes. Here we are. Just a moment. And you remember. And you come back. Now that works when you have a practice to which it is referring. So you've got to have an actual longer practice of meditation, morning, evening, whatever works for you.
Then you're touching it throughout the day.
Exactly.
Right.
It's like, my guru says, when you first wire a home, it takes a long time. But once the home is wired and you want to just turn on a lamp, all you have to do is flip the switch. So the practice is the practice of kind of wiring our homes. And then throughout the day, we're just reconnecting, re-remembering. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. And as the time goes by, the meditative practice itself almost becomes just like flipping a switch, because that wiring has been laid so deeply that you close your eyes and it's literally almost a switch that is turning on. So yeah, it is hard on your own, absolutely. And it's what is being called upon us these days. And I heard somebody recently speak about the fact they had done all kinds of research around consciousness shift. And in order to create a massive change in the globe on a practical level, we don't actually need 100% of the people on Earth to become conscious. We just need 10%. And they did this beautiful presentation on how if we just get 10% of people to actually become conscious, that the entire world would shift, that would be the 100th monkey, the tipping point situation. So yeah, there is a reason to bring the practice into your life.
Sadhviji, thank you so much. I highly recommend Hollywood to the Himalayas if you want the kind of intro and come home to yourself, simple answers to life's essential questions. Thank you so much for your wisdom and your teaching. We really, it's just been a fantastic conversation. So thank you so much.
It's been so wonderful to be with you. And thank you so much for what you're doing, bringing this depth into the world, because that's what we need. And helping people remember.
That was an incredible conversation. I had so many more questions I wanted to ask. But the one thing I wanted to clarify, I totally get the point about the cells and the turnover and all that stuff, and not a biological part of you exists. And it's a way to separate yourself from the timeline of being trapped in abuse. But it also is true that cells communicate systems. And the body has mechanisms that are put in place because of the functioning of certain systems that do need to be deprogrammed, reprogrammed or updated. So I don't think she was saying that there's no such thing as intergenerational trauma or anything like that. It was a different point she was making that I wanted to distinguish. So much great stuff over on Substack, and really eager for people to head over to Substack for more on this conversation.
Where on Substack do they go?
Well, you can go to bialikbreakdown.substack.com, or you can just open the Substack app and you can search Mayim Bialik's Breakdown, and there we are with content you will not and cannot get anywhere else.
I'm excited to be there.
We're excited that you're there. From our breakdown to the one we hope you never have. We'll see you next time.
It's Mayim Bialik's Breakdown. She's gonna break it down for you. She's got a neuroscience PhD,